Well, last week, we explored this idea that God is present with you. You've heard this a lot, and invites you to look for him and make time to enjoy his presence, or what we call abiding. Jesus called it abiding. Remain, stay, abide. You know that? And so what we were just doing, we were trying to practice something, being silent, being still, experiencing solitude. That's what we explored last week. A bit of quiet, making space for that in the midst of a lot of noise and chaos and just busyness and the stuff of life. So that was our focus last week. So we asked the question, what if the greatest thing to threaten, or the greatest threat to experiencing God's presence and sharing it with others, that's a big theme for us right now, experiencing and enjoying God's presence. And then from that, sharing that with others. So we experience shalom, peace with God, each other, within ourselves, with creation. We settle into that, and then we're able to offer that. What do we have to offer others? What we've received. So we have to receive it. So one of the biggest threats to this is not hedonism or secularism, but distraction. Hedonism is obvious to understand. Oh, going after pleasure. You know, the prodigal son, he just went after everything in the city and spent all of his money. We're like, oh yeah, that's hedonism. That's a threat to Christianity in North America. It could be, yes, for sure. What about secularism? Secularism is everything's drifting, you could say, to the left, or drifting secular, so that faith doesn't have a central place. Used to be 90% of Canadians identified as Christians. 65 to 70% of Canadians attended a church regularly. In my generation, when I was a child, that was the number as a child. Now, no, probably 5 to 10% of Canadians attend a church, or up to 15% in some locations, and down as low as 2% in cities like Vancouver. Very secular cities. So yeah, secularism is a big deal, right? We feel it. We're experiencing, we're part of this hedonistic culture, secularistic culture. We're part of consumerism. We're part of materialism. It impacts us, and we're surrounded by it. But distraction is probably more likely one of the things for those of us who are generally going on the right track. I don't know any drug dealers in our church right now. If you are, we have a police officer present, and he probably knows your name. But it's unlikely. It's unlikely that you murdered anybody last night, or that you're involved in extortion, or you're part of the mob. So those would be, the big identifiable sins. But you and I are probably more likely distracted by good things, right? Some of you involved in a lot of good things. And by the way, technology is good, right? I mean, a watch is good, or that's technology, right? That's technology didn't exist 400 or 500 years ago, not the way it is now. Apple Watches, smart watches, are they technology that can be helpful? Yeah, they monitor your health and your heartbeat, your rate, all kinds of things. They're amazing. Smartphones, computers, all this technology, good? Can it be used for good, right? Can it be a distraction? Oh yeah. Like, I got a notification. Oh, what's on? No, this is a dumb watch. I love it. Thank you, Anne. My Christmas present of a dumb watch. All I wanted was something nice to look at, remind me of the time, and nothing else. No offense. If you got a smart watch, I'm just jealous. But it can add to distraction. Come on. It can be a distraction. So we talked about those distractions, and I asked you, what's your distraction? It may not be technology. For me, I'm distracted by technology, right? I look at a verse, it reminds me, I'm doing my quiet time with Jesus, I'm praying, I'm learning, and then, that word. Used to be, guys like Steve over here would see a word in the Bible, and they'd go to the concordance, or to the notes, or to something else, because he's committed to that kind of study. For me, it's technology. So I see a verse, or a concept, or a key Greek word, I'm like all over the internet. What does that mean? Where else is it used? And I'm like, okay, whoa, time out a minute. Jesus wants me to just be with him. I just got distracted by a good thing. Really good thing. Come on, a spiritual thing. I'm searching up Bible words. Isn't that a good thing? It can be a distraction. So for most of us in this room, it's the good things taking the place of the best things. That's what we're talking about. So today we're going to talk about a related theme. The next couple of weeks are all related, interrelated, and all enmeshed with each other. So another thing that gets in the way is hurry. Dallas Willard wrote some amazing books, like Renovation of the Heart, among other things. He followed up on a guy named Richard Foster. Richard Foster wrote the book Celebration of Disciplines, Spirit of the Disciplines. And he was the first evangelical to explore all of these disciplines in our modern era. Before that, these disciplines were basically what do you say? The tub and the baby and the bathwater. How does that thing go? Throw out the baby with the bathwater. Thank you. Okay, we threw out the baby with the bathwater. So as evangelicals, we're like, oh, there's too much religion. Yeah. So we got rid of symbols. We got rid of incense. Anything that's aesthetic or pleasing to the eye. We don't have paintings. We have one cross. That's the only thing that's allowed, really, because we don't have other things. Don't have icons. We threw out maybe chanting or certain types of meditation. And so you and I are part of a culture that for the last several hundred years has said, us Reformed people, not Catholic people, or Anglican people, or those high churches, we're more pure. Why? Because we got rid of a bunch of stuff, so we're more pure. And it's like, yeah, we threw away the baby with the bathwater. In other words, we have lost some very, very good things that can become idols, but don't have to be idols. This can be an idol, that cross right there. Or it cannot be an idol. Celebrating the purity of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Their purity at Christmas. We do this all the time. Mary is amazing. Doesn't get nearly enough airtime among evangelicals and Protestants. And then some of us might look at Catholics and say, well, whoa, are you praying to Mary? I don't quite understand. Are you worshiping, venerating Mary? Are you talking to Mary to get to Jesus? Because Jesus is too busy. So we got to talk to Mary. And we're like, can Mary be an idol? You bet. So any good thing or person can become that. We'll talk more about idols in the future. Back to Dallas Willard. I have digressed. He wrote, hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day. We, or you, must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Is that strong? Ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Wow, this theme comes up elsewhere. It's not just Dallas Willard. I want to talk to you about, we're going to use this gauge. It's really more like a speedometer type of thing, but we'll just pretend it's any kind of a gauge. It could be an RPM gauge, so revolutions per minute. In other words, it's how fast something's moving or how much is going on. Don't worry about the needle that points a certain direction. We're just looking at the gauge itself. And the colors are really instructive. So maximum capacity is where you literally run out of hours in a day. You and I have this. Everyone has a gauge. Imagine looking at the dashboard. I look at my dashboard every once in a while. I have mostly idiot lights. I don't have a lot of gauges because, I drive a minivan. But if I did have gauges like RPM, I think I have that, which doesn't matter because my van decides when it's going to change gears, so I don't really care what the revs are. It does it for me. But imagine in this gauge, maximum capacity where you're literally running out of hours in a day, you work so hard, you come down with a sinus infection, you end up in bed due to exhaustion, or you just go postal and start screaming at your, somebody. You're at dinner at your Thanksgiving or Christmas, and your mother-in-law asks you to pass the salt, and you just go nuts. You're just like, what do you mean? I don't get your own salt. Right? You know the situation. It may not be the salt thing. It might be something else, but it's kind of like, whoa, what just happened there? What is going on here? Because it was not about the salt. It was not about that person. I'm over capacity. So there's another line here. You might call it an emotional or spiritual limit. It's kind of a glass ceiling where if you go over that, you're still functional, right? I digress a little bit, but there are highly functioning alcoholics and there are very low functioning alcoholics. That's probably a more vivid illustration. There are people who drink. I knew a guy who drank 5 beers as soon as he got home from work and went to bed, got up and worked again. There are people who drink before work and they still function somehow. They're just barely able to do it. They become functional. Is that a good thing? Because they can function? Hey, they can function. Hey, I can still do my job. John A. Macdonald. Do you know what he said, first Prime Minister of Canada? I can govern better drunk than you can sober. Now, it's only kind of funny, but in his case, he was a functional drunk, our very first Prime Minister of Canada. But it's the idea that we push ourselves and then we're functional, but is it good? Is it healthy? Is that where we want to be, right? We have the capacity. We don't really have the capacity to live well. We don't really live at peace or at ease in our own body, at peace with Jesus. We're kind of, we've kind of gone over the line, right? We're anxious. We're a little bit mad at the world. We're a bit short on compassion. And here's the key word. We can become unloving. So I'm framing this all with the understanding that a spiritually mature Christian, there's one primary defining characteristic of a mature Christian, and that's love. And I stand on good ground. You can argue with me, but I'll go back to Jesus. I'll go to Paul. I'll go all over the New Testament. And I'll go back to, you can tell me everything you want about how spiritually mature you are, but I'll ask your friends and your family, your spouse, your children, your parents, and they'll tell me how spiritually mature you are by your love. Because that's, Jesus said in John 13, that's how we'll know we're Christians and that we're mature followers of Christ, because we're loving. So, we move beyond loving into overload. That's a problem. Okay? That's a problem. So, moving on to idling or coasting. There's not a technical word, but it's the idea of low RPMs. The bottom line there is kind of where you're coasting or idling. It's where you function most days, just a little bit below or well below that kind of yellow and orange. That's, a lot of us function down there. We have space for the random interruption on the side of the road if somebody needs some help, for that friend or family member in need, just kind of for life to happen. In other words, you have margin in this kind of a zone. So look at all three of these together. You see the three arrows, the three zones. Where would you place? This is for you to do on yourself, or you could just draw a little circle and put an X on your notes. Where would you place yourself on most days or most weeks? I don't mean your best day, and I don't mean your worst day. I mean, typically, where do you kind of live? You said, well, I kind of live in this, I'm not really challenged that much. I live in that green zone, not a lot of pressure, and somebody calls up, sure, I got time. Or you're kind of in the yellow and you're going, I have times of work. When I work hard. And when I rest hard. And when I play hard. And then I go back to work. And then I go back to rest. It's kind of that shifting around between the green and the orange, somewhere in there. And then you might say, well, I live kind of at a spiritually or emotional limit. I'm always kind of, I can function really well. I have a high capacity. I can function well. But I don't know. I'm never really happy, and I'm struggling, and I'm on the edge, and I'm just about to break, and I'm just about to lunge at somebody, and people around me go, you're kind of upset. Like, what's going on? What's behind this? Because I know it wasn't me that you're mad at. It wasn't the thing. Something behind the thing. What was that? And then there's that maximum capacity where you're like, wow, like you don't want to be near, people don't want to be near you, or you don't want to be near me when I'm in this nasty, in the next slide, that overload place of tired and crabby. Hangry, maybe, if you haven't eaten lately. So optimal living or thriving, loving, the loving life, the thriving life, the optimal life, the Jesus life, okay, is in that zone that you see on the screen. That's the ideal. You're going back and forth in there. There's engagement, there's disengagement. There's a great book called The Power of Engagement. And it talks about the value of engaging and disengaging. Engaging, disengaging. I don't know if you noticed this, but for those of us, men or women who work outside of our home, when we're working, we are not present to our children or our spouse. And that's a good thing. Why? Because you need to be present to your employees, to your children in the class, to your staff. You do not need to be present to your children or your wife at your job. You're fully engaged, so a thick arrow towards when you're working with cattle, you're fully engaged with the cattle. And you should be. If you're calving, you'd better be paying attention, right? You're not paying attention to anything but that, right? If you're on the job and you're tracking down bad guys and chasing them down back alleys or all the other things that you enjoy, that police often enjoy doing, maybe not. You better be fully engaged. But then, when you get off work, you need to disengage. And then re-engage with either Jesus by yourself, re-engage with yourself, right? Re-engage with your spouse, your children, your parent. See, there's this constant, by the way, don't fall into this list thing. God, self, family, church, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't exist, doesn't work. I'm telling you, it does not work. Try it. It doesn't work. How do you explain that? You're fully engaged at work. Is God first? Well, no, your work's first right now. And then your spouse is first, and then your child, and then your grandchild. It doesn't work. It's more like a circle where you engage, disengage, engage, disengage. There's engagement. It's an engagement model. Anyways, I digress again. But overload is that terrible place where we're always overcommitted. Thriving is some challenge, not so much challenge. I don't know about you, but I need some challenge. If I'm under-challenged, I get what? Bored. Unproductive. If I don't have a deadline, I'm like, I can get it done whenever. I'm learning Spanish or relearning it, so mañana. I'll get to it, right? If I have a deadline, I'm like, oh, yeah, that motivates me. I need a bit of a deadline. I got this, and this, and this, and this is a priority, and this isn't, and I got to think this through. That motivates me. That actually helps me be productive. So there's engagement, disengagement, and it's all part of that. So today, I want to specifically hone in on this, that we need to be healthy in this regard and to have time and energy to engage with God in his presence and then to engage with others, to be present to God and present. We need to simplify. We need to simplify. In other words, part one of this for the next few weeks is embracing our God-given limits to overcome overload and create margin for God and for others. This may sound like a repeat. There's a tremendous amount of overlap, okay, between all of these concepts. So we're going to call this simplifying. We're going to call this embracing our God-given limits to overcome overload, create margin for God and others. And before you think, oh, I'm not overloaded, thank God that I'm not one of those people, well, we'll explore that a bit. What's our culture telling us these days? Primarily our culture is saying you can be anything you want to be, regardless of your gender, your family of origin, your economic status, or your mental or emotional capacity. So if you answer the question, how you doing? And you don't say, I'm busy. Ooh, busted. I overheard a conversation before. Yeah, I'm busy. You always say that. No, I'm tired. That's what it was. I'm tired. I get it. When you're a teenager, it's hard work. And or when you get old, it's hard work. We're always tired. Okay, but our society says, if you don't respond with, I'm busy, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, oh, lots going on, man, just trying to make it. See, that's the acceptable answer in our society. That's the only acceptable answer. If you say, yeah, I'm rested, I'm enjoying working, playing, I get to do stuff I enjoy, there's some stuff that's hard, but it challenges me to become better. People are like, what? What is wrong with you? In other words, you're not contributing to society if you're not overly busy. You're rested. You're experiencing shalom. You are not responsible. You're not a good citizen. You're probably not a good parent. You're a terrible worker. You're probably not a good volunteer at your church because you're not burned out yet. So having balance or living this life of shalom, having space and margin is not acceptable in our culture. It's not socially acceptable. You need to say, oh, I got a lot going on. That's what we say. Yeah, you can say fine. But if you're not just saying I'm fine, you're probably saying, boy, lots going on. In over my head, but trying to keep my head above water, right? So the other thing our culture says, hey, can you afford the payment this month? Then buy it. Right? If you can afford it, buy it. If you can, then you should. If you're capable of something, you should do it. Should do it. You have unlimited potential, so go harder, reach higher. Who goes around saying, hey, you got a limit on your potential? What? No teacher's allowed to say that to a kid. No parent's allowed to say that. Yeah, you've got some potential, but limited. What? No. You're supposed to say you have unlimited potential, therefore go bigger, go higher, go farther. You can be an astronaut. Well, no, I can't. I wear progressive lenses. I'm 61 and aging and getting fat. No, I'm not going to ever be an astronaut. Ever. I could never have been a fighter pilot for a whole bunch of reasons. Okay? No, you can't do everything. And even if you could, you shouldn't try everything. And there's a reason why. So if you have space in your calendar, what are you doing with that space? Fill it. Oh, you have more room in your house, your shed? Buy something else to put there. There's a space left there with gathering dust. Well, there's room for one more thing. That's kind of what our culture says. Don't have enough time, space, go faster. Or get a bigger storage unit, bigger shop, whatever it might be. Others are achieving more. You should too. I mean, the person you admire just got a master's degree. You better get one. The person you admire just got a second job. You should get one because you're lazy. They got a, well, I should do that. The person you follow on Instagram, YouTube, whatever, they're doing this. Well, I should really pick myself up and do that. Should, right? So, Richard Swenson's a doctor and wrote a book called Margin. I've read it. I lent it out. Can't find it. I'm going to have to go buy another copy. But he says the conditions of modern day living devour margin. If you are homeless, we send you to a shelter. If you're penniless, we offer you income assistance. If you are breathless, we connect you to oxygen. But if you're marginless, we give you yet one more thing to do. Wow. Isn't that insightful? So why are we busy? Why are we so hurried? Why are we so rushed? What's that about? Not all of us, but some of us. Well, Swenson says the diagnosis is chronic overload and the prescription is margin. Overload, the prescription is margin. We'll explore that a bit more. So margin is a space between your load and your limits, between rest and exhaustion. If you've got a 1-ton pickup and you put a dresser in there to help a friend move, that has a huge limit for how much weight that pickup can carry, and you've got a very small load. It's nowhere near the limit. But you start adding things on, pretty soon it comes closer to the limit, and pretty soon your handling is not as good, and your tire pressure is not as good, and you're not driving safely because your load is coming closer and closer to your limit. I mean, that's a tangible thing to understand, right? So if you've got one more straw before you break the camel's back, it's a saying we use, what are we saying? You're so close to your limit. If you add one tiny piece of straw, you're not overloaded. Some of us like to live right there. Oh, I'm okay. Camel's back's not broken. It's okay. I can do this. I can do this. I'm not overly busy. I'm not overloaded. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not doing too much. I don't have too much, right? But we need space between those two things. So margin's a way of making room or intentionally holding time and space because you believe that they're important and valuable things and people who might need to occupy that space. You and I aren't prophets. We don't know the future. At least you can try to predict the future. But what you can't predict is somebody's going to call you today and say, hey, I need a hand with X. Hey, I wonder if you could pray for me. Can we meet together? I need to share with you what's on my heart. And you can't predict that. Will you have time for that? And if you do take time for that, what are you not doing to make time for it? Right? It's easy. I thought about an illustration. I might use it next week. In which you just have, they're just blocks of things. And when your box, let's say your box is just full of blocks. And then you get another block, you're like, okay, which of these blocks will I remove to put this new block here? See, you and I would go, well, come on, Dan, that's obvious. Those are physical, three-dimensional things. It's obvious there's no room. Yet you and I do this every day. We're like, I'm going to fill up my life, my schedule, my time, my house, my shed with all of this stuff because I don't think anything else will come up. And you know it will because it did yesterday and last week and last year. You didn't have margin. You didn't save a space, create margin for the new thing that might come up. We moved to Red Deer. We were trying to make friends, and there were friends of ours who, I don't know if they articulated it or we finally articulated it. Oh, I get it. All of their friend slots are full. So there's no way to get in. We can't make new friends because all of the people we know have only so many friend slots in this box of blocks, you could say. And they're either not willing to remove one or they've never had any space. So we had to either find people who had lots of spaces, right? Or people said, oh, well, you're new. We'll make room for you. We'll find a way because we actually have saved some space for new friends. If you don't save spaces, they don't exist. They get filled. So marginless is the disease of the new millennium, Dr. Richard Swenson says. And here's a description of, on the left and the right, this is what marginless looks like, not having enough margin or space. And then this is what having margin or making space looks like. Fatigue, energy, red ink, black ink. in other words, debt and surplus, you could say. Hurry, calm, anxiety, security, culture and counterculture. Having margin, saying, oh, no, I'm not busy. You got time? Hey, I don't know if you're busy or not, but could you, hey, I'd love to. What? Like, that's a hard thing to say. Sometimes I've said to people, I'm busy, but I have time for this. That might be our answer. We'll make time for this. That's kind of what we're saying. I'll put this aside, and we'll do this. This is more important. So here's some examples of overload. Before you exempt yourself, say, I'm not overloaded. Here's some examples that Swenson provides. Activity overload. Too many sports, too many classes and sports, classes, sports, and work. Add in church, hobbies. Okay, change overload. Man, stuff's changing all the time. I can't keep up. Oh, technology, this and that. Oh, this is hard. Choice overload. I talk to missionaries who come back from, let's say, Papua New Guinea or Irian Jaya area. They come back to a supermarket in the United States. Can you imagine? They used to go to the store and there was just one kind of whatever. Now there's like unlimited choices, and online it gets even crazier. Like, how do you manage that, right? This is hard. I'm sympathizing, by the way, all of us. This is hard. Commitment overload. I'm committed to this, and everybody wants a piece of me. They want me to commit to their cause. Or possession overload. We've got so much stuff, and it takes time to take care of it, to use it, to repair it, to store it. And along with that is debt overload. I mentioned that Visa and MasterCard bills start showing up about now from Christmas presents, and you were going, oh, wow. I thought I had more than I have. Oh, I was banking. When I bought that large Christmas present for somebody, I forgot that, or I didn't factor in, I didn't have margin for car repair. I didn't have margin for my furnace broke down. I didn't have margin for X or Y or Z. So I spent it all in December. Oh, it'll be okay. No, you don't know what's coming. You need margin. So debt overload. And then there's expectation overload. People expect so much of you. You expect a lot. Other people expect a lot. The voices in your head expect a lot. Like, well, if Dad was here, he'd be telling me I could do better. I could do more. My dad used to do this, and this, and this, and I'm not, and I should. That's a disease, by the way. It's called shoulding all over yourself. It's a terrible way to live. Should. Ought. You ought to. You should. We're going to find out that's not the voice of Jesus. That's not the language he uses. Okay. Media overload. Yeah. If you think about this. Somebody says, hey, have you seen, season 3 of whatever? You're like, what? There's a season 3? I haven't even watched season 1. What? That show? And now you can't even talk to people about what they're watching, your friends, because there's just too many shows to watch, too many seasons, too much. And then there's noise overload. You know that scientists are just still analyzing the overwhelm and overload of noise, the noise pollution in our culture. We have more noise now than ever. Everywhere you go, there's noise. And then there's fatigue overload. You're just tired. I remember a time in my life when I had adrenal fatigue. It's not a technical thing. It's not a technical diagnosis, but it's real. If you've been there, it's real. You've been going so hard, and then you just have nothing left. You've been going on adrenaline rather than pacing yourself, and then suddenly you can't do it anymore. Or there's nothing exciting enough to get your adrenaline going, and you were depending on the adrenaline, not your sleep and your stillness with God, to strengthen you for what you needed to do. You were depending, it's a drug. It's very much like, oh, I need that next hit. I need that hit of something so that I can do that next thing. So you've probably experienced one of these. So a marginalist culture leads to overload, which can lead to burnout. It often does. Many of us I've experienced burnout because of overload, because of a marginless lifestyle. I don't blame our culture. I don't blame anybody else. I own it. I am the problem. So another writer, Byung-Chul Han, a Korean-German guy, studied this, and he wrote a book called The Burnout Society. And he said this, a disciplined society. This was the society of our past. If you watch, say, Downton Abbey, right? The nobles, the rich people, if somebody goes to, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. Well, why not? Well, we have a chauffeur. You don't drive yourself. You have a chauffeur. Oh, well, you don't mess with the animals because there's somebody who, does husbandry with animals. Well, I was thinking, oh, no, don't do that. That's why we have a butler. That's why we have So A disciplined society, up until recently, 2 centuries ago-ish, up until the last century, because it really stuck hard in Britain, right, the whole nobility thing, was governed by no, don't do that, no, don't do that, no, don't do that, okay? So in that society, so Sigmund Freud actually was gathering data and assessing society during a disciplined society where everything was no, right? So there's neurosis around that, or this sense that, oh, I can't, or my mommy won't let me, my daddy won't let me, my this, my that, right? But then there's an achievement society, and that's more what we moved into over the last, depending on where you live, over the last couple of centuries. So an achievement society is a society in which it's governed by yes, okay? So a yes society pushes us farther and farther into, oh, you can, so you should. Oh, what do you mean? You can drive your own car. Actually, somebody else can drive your car. Nobody can drive your car now. But if you get into driverless cars. But, oh, you can drive your own car. And now we do our own laundry. Wow. And we drive our own cars. And we do our own farming and take care of our own animals. I mean, that's a Canadian reality. I mean, nowadays, if a guy doesn't know how to hit a nail with a hammer or do something mechanical, at least change a tire, we're like, what's wrong with you? Right? Back in the day, it was, oh, no, don't touch that. That's for somebody else to do. Now it's, you need to do it. You can, you should. Okay? So, yes, society tends to push beyond God-given limits and towards burnout. Here's an interesting observation, tomorrow being the saddest day of the year in Canada. Depression culture, this culture in which many people are experiencing depression, that wasn't a thing 200 years ago. This is a fairly recent thing in history. Depression culture started as the West, the Western Hemisphere, began to say, you do you. Be true to yourself. You can do anything. Don't let anybody, not your gender, your class, your religion, say what you can or cannot do. Wait a minute. Depression culture came from this freedom to be or do whatever we want to do? Think it through for a minute. So why this depression? The depressed individual is unable to measure up. Because now you can do anything, and you should do everything. But the reality of it, you live in this conflicted world in which, but I can't seem to do everything. But I should, I can't. Everybody else is, I should. So the depressed individual is tired of having to become himself, i.e. the best version of yourself. You get that? A better version, a higher achieving version. Versus simply, hey, I am who God made me to be. What, that's not enough? No, for a lot of us, that's not enough, just being who God made us to be, apparently, right? And so we become depressed because we're trying to be something we can't, and being how God made us isn't enough. So the feeling that, this is key for me, that nothing is possible, that's depression, right? I remember when I was really depressed, I would look at a list of 3 things in the morning and I would like, I can't even start the first one. When I'm doing well, when I'm thriving, I look at a list of 20 and I'm going, let's get at them. Bang, 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 right? When you're manic or you're strong or you're acting at a strength, everything's possible, it feels like. But when you're depressed, nothing's possible. But that can only occur in a society that thinks nothing is impossible. You can do it all. You can be anybody. You can do anything you want. But you and I know we can't. And so now we be turned into, nothing's possible. I just can't. I can't even. That's a classic. I just can't even. So people who are in a hurry all the time and have very little margin are not only vulnerable to burnout, they tend not to be very loving. I made reference to this early. This is the critical thing for Christians. Our goal is to become like Jesus, and Jesus was loving. Okay? If you're losing your ability to be patient and loving and have time to be present to God and to be present to other people, that's a problem. And you may have fallen into a trap. It's time to recapture what John Mark Comer calls a theology of limits. Actually, this comes from Pete Scazzero of Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. A time to recapture a theology of limits. It's like, wait a minute. We've been in a theology of potential for a long time, and be all you can be, and God, you can do anything. I can do all things through Christ. It's the most misquoted verse in the Bible in evangelicalism. You know what that verse is about? It's about being content with little. I can be rich, I can be poor, I'm content. I can do all things through Christ. It's not about winning games or getting rich. It has nothing to do with that. Philippians 4:13. It has to do with being content with not having much, accepting your limits. You can be joyful with limits, a theology of limits. I won't get into this, but very far. Orthodoxy, orthopraxy, and orthopathy. Orthodoxy is believing the right things. Orthopraxy is doing the right things. And orthopathy is experiencing God in the right way that he wants us to experience him. John Wesley came up with that idea, that concept, Methodism. And we want to experience God and experience others and experience the Christian life the way God intended us to experience it. Now, we're going back to Genesis 2 and 3, to the creation and fall of humanity. Annalie read it for us earlier. We took excerpts just to get through it all quickly. But in Genesis 2 and 3, we have the creation of Adam and Eve, and they have tremendous potential, don't they? Next slide. Humanity is infused by God with potential. Huge, huge potential to rule as king and queen over the world as a kingdom. Name the animals. Take care of them. Take care of the garden. You're in charge. Rule. Yeah, that's the language of Genesis. Rule over a kingdom. Manage it, rule it, steward it. But also, God infuses us, or Adam and Eve, with limitations, some God-given limitations. Let's explore that a bit. A lot is said in our culture and in our church culture about reaching our full potential, especially for those lacking middle-class assets and advantages. So, for instance, if there are limits we should try to break. I come from a poor family. I should work hard because I can actually get rich, or I can at least do well. I can take care of myself and my family. So if you grew up poor, you're a second generation on income assistance, it's good to break that limit, isn't it? Let's say, well, I don't have a high IQ, but I can graduate from high school. Is that a good thing to do? Yeah, that's a good thing to do. You have potential to do that. You don't have unlimited potential, okay, right? So I may not have the IQ to get a doctorate or be a professor, to get tenure, whatever it might be, but it's okay to overcome limitations. We have a son who was born with learning disabilities, and he has overcome so many things because we love that he has rehabilitated himself and worked hard and found strategies for managing those what might be considered limitations. Those are good things, aren't they? All right? But for the rest of us, we almost don't talk about, there are some limitations we need to receive and we need to be okay with. And we'll talk about what they are. By the way, the mobile phone, speaking of limitations, is a human experiment in omnipresence. Have you thought about that? Now you can be present everywhere. Now anybody can reach you anytime, anywhere. It's a blessing and a curse. Oh, it's so good. I remember answering a phone call on the ski hill one time, and I'm like, yeah, I get to ski and be at work. It's like, this is awesome. But also, that phone, people can interrupt you anywhere all the time if you leave your phone on. It's a terrible thing. It's a curse and a blessing. It can be. So we need to be careful about introducing things into our lives. We should have limitations, but we're overcoming our limitations by always being present with that phone and allowing it to ring all the time. What are some other limitations? They're on the screen. Aging. Physical realities of time and space. You can't be in two places at once, except with your phone maybe. Knowledge. There's only so much knowledge. By the way, did you know that the New York Times, one edition of the New York Times, has more information in it than a person would have in their entire lifetime in the 17th century? If you could get through the entire New York Times, one edition, that's more information than a human being had in their entire lifetime in the 17th century. Wow, there's a lot of knowledge that we don't have, right? By the time you graduate from university, you'll be going, oh, now I know what I don't know. There's so much I don't know, right? Freshman, you're like, whoa, everything's new. Sophomore, wise fool. Wow, I know a lot. Junior, hey, I'm getting to know, I've got some competencies. I'm really, senior in university, I was like, oh, wow, there's so much more. I need a master's or a doctorate, or I need an internship because there's so much I don't know. There's a humility that comes with that. But we have limited knowledge. We have limited IQ. Yeah, can't do much about that. Oh, there's elasticity of the brain. I get it. I'm so glad our son worked hard to overcome some of his limitations, that kind of thing. But we do have a limit. You and I don't have the same IQ. Yours is much higher than mine. Gifting. We all only have a few gifts. Some of us have 2, 7, 1. We don't have all the same gift. What about capacity? No, we have different capacities, right? Family of origin. Yeah, family of origin is a real thing. The family into which you were born, family into which I was born has blessings. There's some challenges. I can't change that. It impacts me. Season of life, God's call on your life, the amount of time in a day, a week, a month, and a life. So what's the solution? It's more time, right? If I just had more hours in the day. No, more space. My house was just bigger. I had a bigger shed, a bigger Quonset, bigger this. That's going to solve it, right? Why not? Why does that not solve the problem? Because we cram more into the increased time and space. We tend to. I tend to. Oh, good, I got an extra. Oh, then I can do this and this and this. We don't say, oh, thank God I got more margin. I'll just take it easy and replenish myself and spend time with Jesus. No, we tend to fill it up, what's there. Right? It's like a vacuum. It just gets filled up. So how to eliminate busy, hurry, but that's caused by overload is to receive the gift of limits. This is the key and the only takeaway today. Receive the gift of God-given limits. The ones that God gave you, you need to receive them and be okay with them. I happen to know somebody who really fights aging. Aging shouldn't be a thing. Natural aging isn't a thing. No, it's a thing. It's a thing. We live in a world of entropy. Things wind down. Bodies get older. There's no fountain of youth out there. It's going to happen. We receive the gift of limits, to use Pete Scazzero's language. So emotionally healthy people, spiritually healthy people, according to Pete Scazzero, understand and receive and embrace limits. They're not frenzied. Their lives are marked by contentment, joy, what we call it shalom. Right? You don't try to keep up with the Joneses, the other people. And you have a sense that, oh, this is why God put me on the planet, just to do this. Not that, this. This is what God called me to. Okay? Clues you don't have margin: fatigued, rushed, anxious, fast meals, little conversation. How you doing? Oh, busy. Oh, tired. Avoiding people who might take extra time, energy, investment, presence. Little or no time for projects and passions. I love this statement. I hate this statement. I struggle with this statement. It just rings true for me, by John Mark Comer. Hurry and love are incompatible. When I'm in a hurry, I am not loving and gentle and patient and kind. Therefore, hurry is incompatible with following Jesus. Jesus in a hurry? You seen that? You seen that? You know, that picture of Jesus hiking up his robe and running? No, I haven't seen that one. Because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. There's only one time God it says that he ran. And it's in the parable of the prodigal son. When did he run? God ran to the prodigal son who's coming home. And he said, I can't wait to have you with me. That's all that matters. It's just you, me, together. That's all that matters. I'm running to you to give you your robe, your sandals, your ring. Other than that, there's no hurry on God's part. And Jesus was never hurried. He always lived in this engagement, disengagement, going away, coming back. Hurry is incompatible with following Jesus. In 1 Corinthians 13, Paul says, love is patient. To be patient means to be not hurried, doesn't it? Not hurried. I'm patient. So the deeper problem for some of us is actually we're trying to give something that's not ours to give, trying to be somebody that we're not, and trying to transgress our limitations or fit a stereotype. What's the essence of the temptation of Genesis 2 and 3? Here we are back at the temptation. Imagine this. Perfect people, perfect place, and Satan comes along through the serpent and says, you're living with limits, but you could be like God without limits. You could know everything. You can know right from wrong. God's just putting a lid on you. There's a ceiling he puts on you. He says, I'm not going to allow you to enjoy life. And they're like, what? God didn't say that. And he's like, no. You need to transgress your limitations, right? It's a beautiful place full of yeses. Eat from anywhere, do anything, woohoo! One no. There's only one no. It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Serpent's temptation is to get them to move beyond the good space God has for them and the limits that come with that. To become like God, to become a person without limits. Our external culture of overload is the byproduct of an internal heart of sin that says, I must live without limits. You're not going to tell me what I can or can't do. You're not going to tell me that I'm too old, I'm too this, I'm not enough of that. I can do it, you can do it, and we should do it. So get busy, buy stuff, overload yourself. Well, we all know where it ends. We all know the story, but we struggle with it. Pete Scazzaro says, just as we find God's will for our lives and our potential and our gifting and our personality, the opportunities in front of us, it's just as true that we find God's will through our limitations. If we ignore our limitations as a means of discovering God's will for us, we drive our soul and our society to burnout, or at least to hurry, which can lead to burnout. So, here's a theology without limits or margin. Okay, and this is where you land. Busy, tired, crabby. That's a theology, a life, an orthodoxy, orthopraxy, orthopathy, you could say, without limits and margin. No extra space, always on the edge, always redlining, to use racing and RPM terminology, always over-revving and never settling it back down again. Wow. This is transgressing your God-given limitations. That's a sin. Overdoing it and saying, you're not going to tell me when I can stop or when I should stop. I'm going to keep being driven. I'm going to keep doing this. So what's the theology with limits? Well, it's this zone. It's this moving, engagement, disengagement, working, resting. You could call it a life of balance. You could call it a life of engagement, a life of thriving, loving. It's a place from which you can love. It's a place from which you can breathe, rest, and then go back to work. I leave you with Matthew 11, 28 to 30. And I love Eugene Peterson's version of it. Remember, this is Jesus. This isn't the slave driver. Come on, work. Faster, harder. Get more. You have more potential. Do more. Go bigger. Go higher. You tired? Worn out? Burned out? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me. Work with me. Follow my example. Work alongside of me. Take my yoke upon you is another translation. Watch how I do it. Learn, here it is, the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. You and I don't have to live with overload. You and I don't have to live with lack of margin. You and I don't have to live without proper rest, without disengagement. We don't have to fall into the lies of our world and our society that says you have to do it all, be it all, have it all. We don't have to because we don't listen to that voice. That's the pattern of the world that Romans 12 talks about. We follow a different leader and a different drumbeat. Here's a prayer of submission and surrender. It's in your notes. Actually, I'll just leave it with you. And we're going to listen to this song in closing and take this prayer with you. And if you didn't get it or don't take a picture of the screen, then you can find a bulletin at the back or I'll get you one. A prayer of submission and surrender. Let's listen to this song and consider the words as we submit ourselves to Christ and his loving limits over us and surrender to his pace, to his rhythms of grace. Heavenly Father, we choose to receive the easy yoke that Jesus invited us into. Whatever's driving us, however we're being shaped by our society, by our world, by our culture, may we recognize it. And may we instead not be conformed to the world, but be conformed to you, to your image, to your example, to your invitation. We live for you, only Jesus. Help us as we discern how to do that this week. Some of us are in patterns that are really hard to break. Some of us have made commitments that we can't just get out of. We can't just stop paying the loan. So we're in a tough spot. We've taken on jobs that are too much. We have commitments that are a lot. Our houses are full of stuff. And it's not just as easy as stopping immediately. It's complicated, and yet you've said it's possible. And so we put our trust in you. Help us to help each other to walk with each other on this journey, whatever it looks like for each of us. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. I invite you to a week of simplicity this week as you contemplate this. And next week to sharing in communion and potluck together. Don't forget, put it on your calendar to bring something to share. Have a great week.